Are you ready to join me in transforming fear to freedom? That's the objective of the show. Are you ready to explore with me and my guests? Are you ready to get into the deep and play? This is where it's at, and that's what it's all about. No medical advice here. Use discernment and decide for yourself if the information is right for you. All views and opinions expressed on this show belong to the individual and are not necessarily shared with the producer of the show. Want more details? Go to letsgetrealchattingwithcatherine.com. Now let's get real and have some fun. Who are we going to explore with today? Come on with me and let's get into the deep.
Welcome to a brand new show on Let's Get Real Chatting with Catherine. Debbi Coleen has been a regular guest on the show for several seasons, and regardless of the topic we choose to explore, we always end up in the deep, deep end. There is no deeper show than shows that I've done with Debbi Coleen. So finally I realized that this show is unique. And so from this point forward, we are christening it with a new name to reflect this reality. So welcome to Go Deep or Go Home with Debbi Coleen on Let's Get Real Chatting with Catherine. I am your host, Catherine Whalen-Costin. Although we intend to explore many things tonight, the big issue is the changes of energy on the planet. And there's nobody better than Debbi Coleen to help us explore that. We're going to look at this feminine, masculine balance and imbalance and what's happened on the big picture and the little picture. And, it's going to be delicious as always. So for any new listeners, let me tell you a bit about Debbi Coleen. Debbi Coleen has been using her intuitive skills for over 20 years, helping people to discover what they already knew but couldn't access. And she's so generous with her time and her wisdom and sharing all of that with us, and I just so appreciate her. Easy to talk to, easy to explore with, and that's what I love to do. She works with her own starseed blueprint based on the Chinese 5-element theory, along with tarot cards, astrology charts, numerology grids, and a variety of other mediums, no pun intended, depending on the needs of the seeker. She also brings her extensive knowledge of personality profiles, family systems, metaphysics, personal growth processes and techniques, spiritual and intuitive wisdom. And she also offers transformative readings, counseling, online classes, and workshops. You can work with Debbi distantly as well as in person for private one-on-one sessions. So I'm really, really happy to be able to introduce this and to just call it what it is, Go Deep or Go Home. And Debbi thought that was kind of fun, and I'm glad she did, and she has decided to join me. So this is so awesome. Welcome, Debbi. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing really well. I've been frantically scrolling through my ephemeris because I realized we have some very, very interesting retrograde planets currently. So
that might explain a few things.
If you've noticed, there's some really big things going on out there, and there's also some very personal things that are mirroring it. So I do notice.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's many who haven't noticed.
Okay, because, I had the opportunity to talk with Rose San Gregorio this morning, and we really kind of talked about some of that stuff too, but this is a little bit different, and I wanted to really expand into what does all this mean? Because, I said to her, this 10 months, I realized we're in October 2nd, 2013, and I remember when we were heading for this year, and people were saying, it's going to be a big year, 2013, the feminine is coming in, and it's going to change and shift, but man, oh man, in 10 months, I feel like I've done 10 years. Some of it really, really enjoyable, and some of it the hardest stuff of my life. So,
Well, I think you could be saying it's like 100 years or maybe even 10 centuries, because we are very, very quickly moving back to an evolution that was much higher in many regards than what we have now.
Wow.
We have been kind of in the chasm of difficulty, exploring some very, very difficult, separated, conflicted energies for thousands of years.
Right.
But the great thing is when that comes to an end, it's like your cork attached to a rock and the rock falls off, and then the cork kind of, in water, the cork just speeds to the surface. Right. So that's what we're doing. So we are really moving through a lot of stuff now. It's really kind of exciting for us to for you to have introduced that telecourse that we'll be doing with Linda Nardelli, because I've worked with Linda Nardelli and masc, whom she channels, for about 8 years now, and I tell you, transformative is kind of a little word to explain what's happened to my life.
I even found that on the show we did to introduce the telecourse, which is just a show to talk about it, and people can go back and listen to that. It's on the show page for sure. But I even found that when the conversation, and then Linda channeled masc a little bit that night, and I found that what happened there affected me in a very positive way. It had and there was it wasn't even a course. It wasn't even, it was, I mean, I was open to it. Certainly I was open to it, and I love that energy, and I love their straightforward way of speaking, and they're very, they don't mince words.
They're mysterious too. They're straightforward, but they're also mysterious. They don't tell you the whole thing. Mm-hmm. But they give you these huge, broad hints that can last, take you through the mystery for a year, and all of a sudden you go, hey, I got that. Oh my, that's what they meant.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a beacon that you keep walking towards until you get there.
I know, but it was so amazing to me because it was, honestly, I noticed certain things from things that they said that would happen to people in the course, and I noticed that things shifted in me overnight.
It does.
It was amazing.
Me too.
Yeah. And I think that also speaks to what you're talking about. These are the times that we've been waiting for. That shift happens really, really fast.
Well, it is interesting because about a year ago, masc told a group of us that we would have, ending at this time, about 10 months of kind of a peaceful, not maybe peace, but a rest period where certain aspects of things would kind of feel maybe, I'm going to use a funny word, stultified, like standing still, and we weren't moving ahead. We were just staying, and we were looking around and going, what's going on here? I'm repeating things, or sort of repeating things, but not really. And, we were wanting to move ahead, but actually the wisdom of the astrological forces, unwound in a way that gave us a rest that actually we really have needed. Because what we're moving into now is some fast-paced change. You can only look at the American government going on strike, so to speak, to go, holy mackerel, this is big. And that's what kind of triggered me to look at the ephemeris today. And the ephemeris, for anyone who doesn't know, is the listing of all the planets and the degrees that they are in relationship to us and in relationship to the sun. And this is what astrologers use to plot charts of dates and things. And believe me, I'm not an expert at it, but I love my ephemeris because I can rapidly go through and pick out my retrogrades. I find retrogrades are very interesting. People tend to be a little afraid of them, but they're not bad things because they just give us an awareness of what is not really what we're concentrating on, like what's the subject in school right now that we're going to be learning the really big lessons on here.
Well, I think it's also as we come to be a little bit more understanding about how everything is connected, how the universe, the planets, the stars, where they're lined up, does in fact have a I'm going to call it an effect on the rest
Strong
of us.
effect.
Yeah.
Yes, even some very scientific, non-metaphysical researchers have agreed that one of the most constant predictors of change and, let's say, theme is astrology. You know, when astrology is consulted, more than any other predictor of things, it seems to have a very, a noticeable effect. I mean, it changes from person to person, and horoscopes are kind of a poor example because, you're dividing the world of 7.5 billion people, a very unique individual aspect, into 12 signs. Like, that's just the sun. That's where the sun was at the moment of our birth. And so with the calculations into, the odds of all the other planets and the movements, the houses, the relationships between planets and houses and everything, it's, and signs, I didn't even say signs, the complexity of it is intense. And so I'm a kind of a dabbler, but I'm a dabbler who gets the pattern. That's where I work from, is the pattern. So a few of the patterns that I work with, one of them is, like I said, the retrogrades. The retrogrades really show up intensity. A retrograde is where, when we're standing on the Earth and supposedly looking out at another planet's orbit, because we're closer to the sun or farther from the sun, it looks, and our relationship to the sun, in our orbit, it looks as though that other planet is falling behind us,
Oh, okay.
It just has to do with distance from the sun and orbit. That's all.
Okay.
But it's like, that energy starts getting pulled back like a strong rubber band as we start going forward on Earth, and that other planet, like way out there, Pluto, that takes an umpteen number of years to orbit the sun compared to the Earth.
Okay.
And then there's a planet on the inner, like Mercury, that laps us all the time. We get 3 retrogrades with Mercury a year. So we kind of really notice them because they affect us personally. So that's another rule, a pattern, is that the planets between Earth and Sun, we call them the more personal planets, like even including Mars, which is further out than we are. But those are the smaller personal planets that affect us at a more personal level. Whereas the bigger planets, from like Saturn, Jupiter, and out to Pluto, and today I was even looking at a planetoid or an asteroid called Chiron, which is way out there.
That's kind of a new one too, right? Or
yes,
relatively
new meaning that, yes, it was discovered more recently because it is out there and it is small.
Yeah, I didn't mean that it was just created, but it's always new to us when we can see something or discover something we think is new. It's funny.
And the interesting thing is that's a very good point, is that when we discover it, is very coincidentally, and I'm using the finger quotes things that kind of awful, but coincidentally, that's when that kind of energy starts affecting us. It's kind of like, when at a certain point in our personal growth, as we mature, we start noticing something like boys at a time when hormonally, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, they've always been there, but now all of a sudden we notice. Yeah, exactly.
In a different way, anyhow.
Yeah, well, or it can be as simple as noticing you've got something, I hate to say it, but, say something that you're afraid of. If somebody says to you, well, you're about to go somewhere, and they say, well, we have, let's say you're afraid of cats, which is my thing. You say, well, I have a cat, or if I found out, all of a sudden my perception of the event is going to be different than it would be if I didn't know that there was. That's
right, at a personal level. And so these large planets kind of affect us in large ways. And right now we have 2 big planets, Uranus and Neptune that are affecting us very, the big picture planets. They're the big ones. And Uranus, of course, is very interesting because that's the planet associated with Aquarius, and we're moving into the age of Aquarius.
Ah.
So, yes, and another interesting thing is what are they retrograde in? So what is the constellation that, from our vantage point on Earth, is behind that planet? And I was just going to check out what's behind us. Oh, Aries. Uranus is in Aries, so there's a lot of passion and action in that. And fire, and Uranus is an air planet, so and Aries is fire, so you get a lot of like lightning and fast change and unpredictability. It's very unpredictable.
Like wind, we've had a lot of wind on the planet.
Yes, and
not just in our area, all over. I've heard it from people in as far away as New Zealand saying they've had high winds, and we've had a lot in Canada and different places.
And even symbolically, when you talk about, there's a lot of windy stuff going on. A lot of
hot air.
A lot of hot air. And a lot of lightning strikes, things that we never expected to see, and things being taken too far. Aries and Uranus together can really open up things that, you might say, oh, better not do that, like tactfully, brushing over certain things. Not Aries and Uranus. That's not going to happen. It's coming out. That is skeleton rattling, skeleton walking energy.
So this is the truth coming out. This is what we've been waiting for, many of us.
That's right. And with a rush, like there's no holding this back. So I just want to see what Mercury is retrograde in, and I'll be able to. Oh, Scorpio, yes. Of course, this time of year it'll be in Scorpio. So, yeah, we have a real powerhouse here of planets and retrograde planets and the constellations they're in. So then we have Neptune retrograde. Neptune is about our visions and our fantasies, our dream life, like it's the cultural, political correctness and the imagination, the romance. It can, it has everything to do with romance. And I don't know if you've noticed that the masculine is not being very sweet about their romantic idea. Like we're not seeing the masculine in its romantic ideal. It's kind of showing up in passive aggressive and petulant ways. The way I've been explaining it to people is a lot of the masculine energy, and that includes us women, believe me, it's reverting back to the age when the masculine, actually when the feminine gets subverted, okay? Okay. Then, it's not all right for the masculine to act in a feminine way, where, that second class, female, that's kind of the story of the Piscean age. That's what we've been exploring, is what happens when you hold down the feminine, or actually what's happened is we've just had a terrible lack of what we call yin or feminine energy in this part of the galaxy. It's
so,
it's
just
one
to
of
be
those
clear
patterns.
though, Debbi, you're saying it's been our, it's not that that's true, it's that it's been our practice to, if a man or was acting in a feminine way or connecting to his feminine attributes, that it was wrong. That was our conditioning.
That's
and now
right.
We're learning that is
everybody's
wrong.
saying, suck it up, don't cry, that whole emotional stuff that's given to the feminine, the expression of the feminine, that inner knowing, the connection to intuition. We poo-pooed that, Spirituality, that inner knowing, that inner connection with divine, that's been poo-pooed too, taken away by religion, It's, you need to go through the priest. That's kind of
that's why the priest, the male priest, was created in a positive image, whereas the female with intuition was a witch, which was opposite of end of the spectrum.
And this is kind of a hot topic gender-wise because, feminine, but we all have our own feminine and masculine balance. And the thing that I always know about it is it's not about right and wrong. It's about this part of the galaxy has been very empty of the yin part of the yin-yang balance. It's just about the energy currents of space in some way that I don't really understand, but I get it, that's what's happened. Mm-hmm. As far as I understand, the Hindu mythology was that 2,000 years ago, the female aspect of godhood, Shakti, said, "Oh, the next 2,000 years looks kind of crappy for the feminine. I'm going to sleep." And supposedly she woke up in the 60s. Went to sleep around the time of Christ and woke up in the 60s because she, said, "Don't bother me."
And that makes sense, too.
Doesn't it?
Because you can see that.
Well, in the Christian religion, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Anyways, not to be inflammatory here. I'm just talking very generally. Mm-hmm. And I'm not pointing fingers and I'm not being gender specific here. This is just an exploration we've done, and it's changing now because the yin-yang energy is moved back to a balance, and because we've always been more used to it than the last 2,000 years when we haven't been, we're moving into an accommodation of that quite quickly. And unfortunately, these bodies we are in are not so used to it. So there's stresses and strains, and the culture that's been developed through, time now is, rapidly changing. When the American government has called for war against Syria, that yin energy says no war. Mm-hmm. War doesn't stop war.
No.
And so there's been a huge movement against it, even though we haven't always heard the details. It hasn't gone through the way I believe it was expected to, based on previous calls to war that have come through the American government.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, too, I think it's really important to recognize that it's not we're not putting down religion. If you happen to be, practicing a certain religion and you want to believe that and it does it for you, more power to you. I think what we have to acknowledge now is that it's changed. Life on this planet has changed, and that's what we're talking about. It's not about judging right or wrong. It's about acknowledging this is happening. There are more women who are speaking out, who are standing up, who are saying, enough. You know what? We have had enough. There's terrible things happening to women all over this world. There's terrible things happening to men in the name of profit, war, and stuff. And you know what? We have just been silent for many reasons. I think a lot of women have been silent because they don't have the support. We haven't had that strong masculine support to speak. And I don't just mean in our homes, but in our societies. You can see it in our governments, in our who's in power. Primarily, and I'm not saying that they took the power necessarily. Sometimes they did, but a lot of times we gave it to them, which is absurd. And I think that's what's happened is there's a place where people are just saying no more.
Well, there's a place where we have this flooding imbalance of masculine and feminine. It's an energy thing, and it's not about the people. It's about how we've lived with it, how we've reacted to it, how we've explored it. Mm-hmm. Up until now.
Up until now, because that's what this is what I'm really sensing. I mean, I'm fairly active on social media and Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that, and the one theme that to me there's women who have, I've seen them read my posts before or read other things, and they don't comment and they don't share and they don't anything. They're reading it, but now it's just like a house on fire. It's like people are saying, what about this and what about that? And it feels like there's been a real, and men too, not just women. Men are saying, no, enough already. We don't want to live like this.
Exactly. And that just shows up, and that's really being pushed through in, I'm seeing that so strongly in the retrogrades that we have. These Uranus and Neptune retrogrades are very long, months and months. I didn't find the beginning date, but Uranus, which is aligned with Aquarius, goes direct in December, and it was, it's just months, like 5 or 6 months. And Neptune is going... Mm-hmm.
Does it support us, Debbie? Does it support us in that movement? Is that what's happening? Or does it propel us or,
Oh, both. All of it, all the above.
Okay.
Because this is an energy. This is not and it's how we are with it. It's like if the wind blows, do you let it blow you down or do you work with it? It's just a wind. It's
lift your wings. Lift your wings and let it take you, or buck up and try to hold up against it.
Well, exactly. Are you going to try and go against it? If the tide is turning, how do you use it to get where you're going? Mm-hmm. And of course, the universe being such a benevolent place, despite our beliefs to the contrary, I guess. We have immense assistance and support in this, but with free will, of course, we have to ask for it and require it. I just want to kind of go back to what you were saying about religion, too, is I don't think we've gone in like an opposite direction from religion. I'd just like to say that what we've done is we have gone to a bigger concept. What I see of all of the religions is they're starting to expand their boundaries. I'm really impressed, I have to say, by some of the things that some of the religions are doing to move into relationship balancing, the counseling aspect, the empowerment. It's like what we're doing is we're moving out of roles. And religion is just, it's not anything separate than us. It is us. It's our current local or mass consciousness or lineage understanding of spirituality. Right. And it's just changing. It's expanding in every front. In fact, what I've heard is by the end of this century, all the religions will have expanded to a place where we have kind of one spiritual understanding that encompasses everybody's, that we will be expanding ourselves and our understanding of what spirit is, what divinity is, and who we are to a place where all of the religions can absolutely agree and not be unfaithful to their roots.
And just a matter of how you choose the traditions and practices, which is totally different than what we grew up with, well, what I grew up with, which is if you weren't of my particular religion, you were wrong. And it didn't matter which the other, and everybody had the same kind of thing. It's like, if you don't believe what I believe, you're going to hell. And it was so weird because everybody had the same one. That one, we had a theme.
And that's just how we are awakening in this time. And everyone is doing their very best, and how, people practice their religious, spiritual understanding and belief in the most perfect way that they can. And what I notice is that even people who are in the same, let's call it religion, the same sect or group, there's a huge spectrum in actually how the beliefs are created, and that, or how the beliefs are practiced and followed.
And understood.
And that's just how we are as human beings, is we all have our own focus and our own light that we shine into the darkness in our own totally unique ways. And we can call it Catholicism, we can call it Muslim, Mohammedanism, we can call it whatever we want, but it is actually a unique practice that is defined by certain patterns that we've accepted, and they've worked, but we're always, religion and spirituality are always growing and expanding.
Mm-hmm.
I like to look at it though, as if back in the year zero, if there wasn't zero, let's say 1 AD, our world was like 1 year old. There was a new beginning without the feminine energy in the proper proportion. Shakti was asleep.
Mm.
And so that was a new beginning. We had to start all over again as children to learn how to deal with a world that was completely about the physical, the active, and so, the feminine yin energy just wasn't there to connect with. We had to work very hard to connect with divinity.
Mm.
And over these 2,000 years, every 100 years I see it as we've gained another year. And so, as a culture, as a world, so now, we're kind of functioning as 20 to 21-year-olds.
Mm-hmm. But
we're
in the
kind of moving along from a place where, as a culture, we have started to accept responsibility as adults for our actions. We're no longer protected by the institutions and babysitting services that have been put in, we have put in place to protect us.
Mm-hmm.
As we've gotten used to this unbalanced energy system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it took us a heck of a long time on this planet to get to the place where we were even capable of living without very much feminine energy.
Mm-hmm.
That's not an easy thing for us to do, to be disconnected from our source.
Right. So, but don't you think then, like as you're saying, evolution as we've evolved, after, I don't know, I think it was 1989, they were talking about the harmonic convergence of, where we kind of, there was a path that was kind of like we could take, which was basically to destroy the planet or change our ways, which collectively we decided to change our ways. And a lot of people aren't even aware of that, but that happened at a subconscious or a higher self level.
Yeah.
Don't you think that the evolution has speeded up? Because it kind of feels like that to me, like there's more and more people.
Absolutely. Because what we're doing is we're reintegrating with a comfort with the balanced energy, because actually we have worked through thousands and thousands of years as a balanced masculine and feminine energy. We've walked with the angels.
Mm.
We have that in our karmic history. We know how to do that. So what we're doing is we're linking up what we've learned in the absence of that feminine yin energy, that inner connection, and now we're linking it up. We've had this whole rather horrendous 2,000 years. I mean, really, it's been hard on us all, hard.
Mm.
It was not for the faint of heart to come here in that land of and times of separation, Really, we have been so admired by those who didn't come in body form for actually being willing to do this. It's like exploring the deepest deeps of the ocean.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we had to do it in body form, too. That was part. It had to be embodied in order to, because we are connected to the physical
Earth.
And
that's what the experiment is let's see what it's like to be bodies and have emotions and have free will, and then take away the connection to our spiritual self.
Mm-hmm.
Like, holy cow, how could you get deeper into different?
Wow.
Really, it's like human beings who need to breathe air going into the deepest part of the ocean where there's no air. That's what it's like. Murky, dark, strange life forms, unnatural physical things happening,
Yes.
A lot of courage to come here.
Yeah, and so I think now that we're sort of, we're being supported I mean, everybody I talk to that's of the metaphysical, spiritual teachings will tell. I mean, everyone says we are supported. We are so supported. We are so loved. We have so much, and it doesn't matter which religion you are. I believe everyone I've talked to, angels are a big part of every religion, which is pretty amazing to me that we could all share that understanding.
We should agree on that, eh?
Yeah. That, we know that we have this help. It's not for just certain people and whatever. It's part of it. So I'm just feeling like this stuff that has to come out. And some of the things that are going on the planet right now, as you say, we've got funny weather patterns and we've got really a mess politically, and yet it doesn't feel like as big of a mess or as out of control as it could have been. It feels
because the feminine energy is very sure. There's no question. When you're connected to source, it's very different than when you're unconnected. It's not opposite. It's like all of it. You know what you know, and you know what you don't know, and you know. You're connected, and you know what's right. You're connected to your ethical self. That's what we're coming into contact with now, is our sense of ethics in a bigger context than just following the old patterns and the old rules. We're coming into a time when we're having to readjust what is right and wrong. We're not agreeing to war. We're not agreeing to being slaves. We're not agreeing to being manipulated. We're going to be very consciously looking at what has gone wrong on this planet and making very deliberate choices about the rules and the patterns that are put into place to ensure our liberty, to ensure not just the opposite of what we've had. No, we're going to be putting into effect big, principles. We're going to be living a principled life rather than a life of rules that we've had up until now. Rules don't have any stretch to them. Laws don't have stretch to them. They cover one situation, and when we get to a place where they don't cover the situation, we have to make another set.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Is so bounded and territorialized it now. All the rules.
Well, yeah, and I remember when my children were young, and I was, looking at different ways of raising them and wanting to raise them more consciously than I was raised or than I was seeing around me, because there was so many people who were kind of looking at just doing what their parents did, or there were other people who were looking for something different. And one of the things that somebody wrote, wasn't my idea, but I read it and I incorporated it, and I thought it was so powerful, and it was, don't give your children a list of rules of, don't do this all the time. Rather, give them the ability to think for themselves, so that in a given situation when there's no rule on the list, they will be able to tap into their inner guidance and make a choice. Is this for me or is this not for me? Rather than, you can't write, like, don't jump off a bridge and don't associate with
an understanding of consequences and an understanding of the golden rule, which is, do unto others. And nurture that part of them which transcends the separated self.
Right, and if
that part of them that has compassion.
Yeah, and I'm thinking if we collectively step into that, we can have more compassion for people who have antisocial behavior. That's what I'm going to call it, because it really is. From everything I've learned on the metaphysical and spiritual aspects, there isn't really right and wrong in that level. It's all about the journey. It's all about the learning, and we don't know the big picture. But there are definitely, in the physical world that we live in, there are behaviors that are clearly antisocial, that are cause discomfort for others or self, And
those
so
behaviors that stem from fear and what fear brings in. That's where that saying of, where there isn't love, there's fear.
Right.
You have love or fear, and fear is what creates rules, the need for rules, the control. It's fear. And as we move into this time, what we're doing is we're moving into the connection of knowing who we really are, and so much of the fear falls away. It's not like we even notice it. It's just that day by day, we have more certainty and more good things happening and more faith and trust, because faith and trust are nurtured in us because we're more connected to who we really are, which is perfection.
Well, and it brings me to because so many people are becoming a lot more aware of their power, aware of their inner strength, their connection to source, that those people who are decision makers and in positions of power, they too are also, it's not exclusive to the little 99% or so they talk about. The 1%, there are people within those realms who surely are also becoming more conscious and understanding, gee, what am I doing here? Which I think is what's contributing to the shift. It's not just the pressure. Like a lot of people think, well, we've got to put pressure on these people. And I'm not sure that that's entirely true, because nobody had to put pressure on me to wake up and see the light. It wasn't pressure that did it. It was a thirst, a hunger within me.
Well, this is a time when we start seeing the 60% being empowered. This is where the 60%, we move from, 5, maybe 10% of awakeness to 60%. All of Oprah's audience is waking up.
That's a lot. That's a big audience too.
Well, it is a big audience, and it doesn't, and I didn't say Oprah because it's female. Please don't take it that way. It's not that at all. It's just you wanted to kind of make a joke.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's true. It's not because she's female. However, when, I look back in history, the Donahue show was extremely popular. It was a male talk show. It was really, he was the biggest in North America and maybe in the world, but, North America for sure. And he was, I would say, very connected to his feminine, but still masculine.
Kindly.
Yes, and so when it makes sense to me that he ushered that in, and Oprah took over from there, and because that is what happened. They were both on at the same time, and then there was a consciousness shift, because there were other talk shows on TV that were really scraping the bottom of the barrel in the way that they were. I mean, there's no other way to put it. They were
sensationalism.
Extremely, and they were showing the worst of the worst in human behavior.
Which is, an education in itself.
It was indeed, but it was
we
also
laugh at ourselves.
It was, but it was also, I think, very key in because it was so outrageous, like it really got outrageous, that people went, no. And even Oprah, she kind of, I remember her talking about how she made a choice. Is either, be sensational, compete with this, or do it her own way. And she ended up creating her own network, her own show.
She just did, yeah.
Absolutely. But to me, that is the power of the feminine that knows. And we embraced it. We too embraced the new, consciousness. And when, she started out, she wasn't talking about consciousness, but she was definitely raising the vibration by the topic she was talking about, but also her presentation. And I think that is indicative of, indicates the shift globally. So I think it's perfect that you would mention her name, because she had a huge impact on the globe. There's just no doubt about it.
Yes. Well, and we did have, I'm just checking the name of this, I'm not seeing where she is, but her name was, I think it was Mary Martha. She was a woman who was on the radio.
Oh, you told me about her.
Yeah.
That was, quite a few. Was it Margaret Mary or something like that? Or
Mary Margaret or something like that.
Yeah.
And I wish I could remember, because she was really an amazing woman. She had such an empowerment for women at her time. I mean, she was back in the early part of the century, and I think. I'm showing my ignorance here, but I love the story of how, when she would say that she used a certain product in her baking, there would be this rush to the supermarket
right.
for women buying that product. And she was just a calm, very friendly woman. And, she lived in they did the radio shows from her home.
Mm.
She got to meet some of the very important people of her time, because she was a woman on the radio. She was someone that people trusted. And so she became like the first, star who the advertisers started recognizing the power of that image.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what I like about that story is that she wasn't selling it by using her sexuality per se. She was
on the radio, what are you going to do?
Exactly what, I'm just, it's so, it really, it seems
other
like.
Than her being female.
I know, but the fact that people, she was she's speaking her truth, and she wasn't, I mean, of course, her sexuality or sensuality would come through because she was a woman.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
I'm not going to say her sexuality. I'm going to say the role that she played as a housewife took her way beyond being a housewife. And yet it was, what started out being who she was became something that she had to, I imagine, portray.
But at the same time, it really, like you're saying, this was, way before Oprah and Donahue and whatever. But, so there was a conscious understanding that the feminine, the head of, well, we didn't call it the head of the household, but the truth was, what in those days, the housewife or just the, or the wife in that role was very much, her word was very important. I mean, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. I mean, that is the truth, right? And so even though they didn't have money, and very often they had to ask sometimes their husbands for money, or they had to have a lot of women had, a cookie jar that they took some of the money aside for themselves and so forth. There were all kinds of things, but the truth was,
money.
Yeah, the women
just selling the eggs, yeah.
Exactly. So, but they still, they did have a certain influence, a very powerful influence even.
Well,
I mean,
I think what we saw at that time was a huge rebalancing of the world as families came off of the farms, between the First World War and the Second World War. There was a change from 80% rural to 80% urban, which in a short length of time like that is a huge shift. And so a whole cultural paradigm was created from where, husband and wife were kind of entrepreneurs on their farm, feeding their family from their farm. And, the husband was usually not more than a mile away from home most of the time.
Right.
To a time when, suburbia became the big new thing, and the wife had the station wagon and the man took the train or took the other vehicle into the city to go to work every day. And he stopped being part of his family for most of the day. He wasn't working specifically on family projects on the farm anymore. He was putting his energy into corporate America. And men were and the whole country was propagandized to make that happen. Women were given these rules about, how you looked and what you did to take care of the children. The wives became, such the lawgiver of the family.
And the trophies, it was more about
And also, you know, she had this job where she didn't have her husband's support all day long, and he would come home tired and had a totally separate experience from her. She didn't know where he was or what he was doing all day long. So there was this whole mystique set up about the office, you know, where men started working at businesses that were so far beyond the personal. You know, they started, you know, destroying the environment in a big way for money and profit. And the whole concept of business became quite different. It wasn't about the town store looking after the country folks' needs. No. It was about mining and construction and huge earth moving and it just, you know, it very suddenly everything about life became so totally disconnected. Women became disconnected from being part of the workforce. They had a specific job in the farm. The farm could not go on without them. But all of a sudden, here they are with their freezer and their fridge and their, you know, that was their world. Yes.
Yeah.
You know, the coffee clutch and the getting the kids to school, and then the decline. You know, there was, you know, it became the nuclear family, so extended family became obsolete.
Well, they had, and
women really became displaced in the power that they had in the family, the role that they had, and men too.
Absolutely, and both disconnected.
Men became the wage earner. Men, you know, they were going to work for a paycheck. The whole energy of the family became focused on getting that paycheck, and the man became quite empowered in that way. You know, corporate America gave them this mystical role as the wage earner.
And both became disconnected from the land.
Absolutely.
You know, because...
Yeah, and then in the 70s, we saw women starting to go into the offices, you know, and all of a sudden the women are looking around and going, holy cow, is this where you're working? This is horrible. Like, holy mackerel. And then, you know, Johnny's sick. Johnny's got a fever. Well, what do you do then when both parents are far away from home?
Well, and sometimes it started, you know, you can see there was a sort of it sounded like it was an intriguing thing to have a career and you know, like for many women it was something they enjoyed doing. So great, but
well, you know, you're stuck out in the suburbs and you're not important.
Yeah,
all of a sudden you become an appendage to a man. That's not what women were in the early part of the century, really.
No,
I mean, in a different way, perhaps, but still, they had a solid role.
Yeah, and they had a voice, even though even before they had the vote, which to me was, you know, just taking their voice out to the world, and they wanted to have an influence on the world. But they had a voice in their homes, which influenced the rest of the community. And that's what kind of got lost in, you know, I mean, you had the 60s, which I remember reading about it being called the housewife syndrome, where, you know, women were going to the doctor and being put on Valium. Why?
Exactly.
Because their whole world had changed and they became, you know, ornament, you know, just
That's
so you could get her dressed up for when the boss came for dinner. And it's absurd, you know, but...
Well, and then the pressures became very, very hard, too, because everything had changed, and she became solely responsible for the children, the housework, the meals. There was no assistance because the whole extended family system was broken down.
But then
houses
also
were small.
Well, and then the that whole keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak, you know, became, well, now, you know, she needs to actually get a job as well. We need to bring more money in so that we can have the things, so that when I invite the boss for dinner, who I'm trying to impress, he'll be impressed by my house and my, you know, it's so crazy that we did this to ourselves.
Well, the goals became so much more separated from what, you know, had been important before, which was the relationship with the land and
each other. And we're so busy chasing that extra money to do the thing whatever it is, the house, the whatever. And, you know, there's so much, I saw this with the big boom in Alberta. There's so many people living in absolutely beautiful, big homes, and they aren't living in them. They're not home. They're both parents are at work and the children are at the daycare, and so, you know, they see each other passing in the night. And some places, I remember a woman being on my show talking about her neighbor they had a new house and they had the whole thing, and they were both driving the whatever cars and in debt like up to their eyeballs, but they only could afford to decorate or to furnish the house, the living room, so they kept the curtains open so that when people went by, they would see that, you know, they looked like they had arrived. But the rest of the house wasn't furnished, just the part that people could see. Now that is very revealing.
Symbolic.
It is, because that's how we're living. We're living totally disconnected from each other and totally, and I should say up until now, because that's what I see changing. Fathers, you know, this generation of fathers wants to be connected to their children. They want to be caregivers. You're not having to force these guys. It's not embarrassing. Like when I had my kids, so, you know, 30 years ago or so, it was rare. The odd father was going in the delivery room. The odd one was going to the Lamaze classes and taking part in upbringing. But really it all fell to the woman still. And now that is not, I would say more than I wouldn't say more than the majority, but an awful lot of the young men today are saying, no, I don't want to be disconnected from my children. They're taking paternity leave. So there is a shift. There is a shift on this planet. And I also noticed, well, we're mostly talking about North America, but I notice this is happening all over the world. You know, there are women's issues that men are definitely supporting because they're not, I mean, they're called women's issues, but they're not women's issues. They're human issues. It affects women.
Well, and it just takes us back to that thing of Shakti waking up in the 60s, you know? The symbol of the feminine energy returning to the planet and the exploration of that separation and the pure physical existence starting to, and that physical existence is represented by the yang masculine energy. It's the energy of being in the physical body, whereas the yin and feminine energy represents that inner connection to who we really are, our divine self. So we were stuck in the experiment completely,
But this is where, this is what's changed, and this is what we can look forward to, is that, this is, I really, I'm asking the question really, but I'm feeling it strongly. So my intuition is saying we are on the road to adult conversation about how to live on this planet. Adult conversation about, do we really need to go to war? No, I don't think we do.
If you're 20 years old, 2013, drop the 13, we're 20.
Okay.
20-year-olds are responsible for their own behavior. For the most part, they can drink and smoke and vote, at least they will by the time they're 21, handle their own money, not need to have curfews and, babysitters and restraining. It's a different world now that we hit the 20s.
And also,
so I think that what we're seeing here is what we're talking about. We're talking about being inside the experiment and we're looking around and going, things are changing. On the outside of the experiment, the languaging is, the vibration is raising. We have more balance in the masculine and feminine, and not just that, but if you think about our bodies and our beingness here as being like a computer, okay? We're running programs, whatever. We just got max upgraded, okay? When you talk about higher vibration, it means that we can download more of who we really are in our unseparated selves, our non-dual selves, our parts of ourselves that is connected to our source, to divinity, to the part of ourselves that doesn't really function in this realm, the part of us that's above the ocean.
Right.
So, we're talking about it in two different ways. We're talking about it from the outside big view of our witness self, our spiritual self, and we're talking about it from our ego self that's in it, the ego being that survival part of us that gets us, keeps us being run over by the bus and putting our hand on the hot stove,
Yeah, right.
How do we get along with a bunch of people who have bodies and they're chafing and itching and
well, and I
all
think
kinds of awkward things, and they're wearing clothes.
But a 20-year-old who wants to, has finished high school usually and is choosing further education or a career or whatever, they aren't as inclined to want to, hit every person that they disagree with. There's
consequences.
Well, there's
when you hit 20, there's consequences that you recognize because you're now held responsible to your behavior. It's an expectation.
Exactly, and that's what I'm...
At a capacity. It's a capacity of a higher vibration, more mature culture.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying about, what the situations that are happening on the planet that are creating this different kinds of stress and conflict and, arguments. We're not getting along here. We don't like the way this is happening. But more and more people are stepping up and saying, okay, but we have tried the other solution, which was war. We have not enjoyed losing our children, our men and women, to war. So let's do this different. Can we do it different?
Yes.
And before, I don't think there was even that, can we do it different? It was just, well, that's what we got to do. Whoever's the big boy on the block is the one who's going to, win this.
Well, and that is the physical response. That's the beast. That's the masculine. You can call masculine. It's not male. It's the masculine, the yang energy, the outer, it's the duality. It's like, what are you going to do here? And, now we have the capacity to bring in more of our connection to source that says, listen, if you kill that person, that's a part of you. Because you're part of a wholeness, a oneness. And it's a part that the thing about that feminine yin energy is it's very knowing. It does not have any doubt. Like a mother who's sending her children off to war, she knows it's not good. She knows she does not want it. There's no story about courage, heroism. It's like that child could die. There's no, it's a truth.
But that's for women who are in their feminine, because
but
I know...
I'm talking about the feminine in all of us.
Okay, all right.
So it isn't about women. It's about the feminine in all of us coming back to balance. It wasn't there before, and now it is. That part of us that's connected to the oneness and knows that when we go to war, we're not doing anything except creating more karma, more mayhem. We're not having the kind of life that we really want to have. And the feminine is fierce. Our feminine energy is that part of us that is truly courageous, that does heroic things. That, when men are on the battlefield or anywhere and they do something totally courageous, putting themselves in total danger, they are in their feminine energy. They're in the part of them that knows there's something more than the physical.
Okay, but that's not the same one. That's not the same part that is in going out looking for a fight. That's not the feminine. No, that's the separated self. That's the yang energy that is actually believing that when it punches itself in the face in somebody else, that it's actually, there's not going to be a painful reaction. It's the person who's living in the world of physics that for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. So you go out and you disturb the balance and you start getting reactiveness. It's someone who is
Yeah, and that's what we are. That's not what we're leaving behind. That is what we are putting into a bigger world of understanding. I've got my hands here going out into a big globe shape, a spherical shape, because what we're doing is we're not doing the opposite of what we did before. We're doing a wholeness now. We're seeing a wholeness. Where sometimes, there's the feminine realizes that there has to be a death in order for life to happen. The feminine is fierce. The feminine knows truth in the moment when it's needed because it's connected to the divine, eternal truth. That there is no death, and so sometimes something has to end, like, well, let's just say Christ on the cross, for something else to be born, for something to change. There's the negative and the positive is happening all the time. In fact, the feminine energy is the negative energy. It's the inner dark energy. It's the energy that is not in the light of the physical world.
And this is what right now, we'll see a lot of people are talking about, that having to let go of pets, let go of relationships, let go of jobs, let go of beliefs. This is a big one, I think.
Yes.
And
I think this is what we're seeing. I'm seeing this in all relationships right now, is that part of the masculine that has used separation and threat and the fight, the aggressiveness, the
control and manipulation.
Yes,
that stuff's
power
gone
over.
Yeah.
Yes, that has got to end. And the feminine, which used to be kind of, for very good reason, we were all afraid of that because, we didn't have the balance of energy to support us. We didn't have the vibration to support us. We didn't have the connection to the divine realm the way we do now. And there's a calmness here in people saying no, and saying, okay, if, you want to take your bat and ball and go home, you do what you have to do. I'm staying here. And so it's creating some very big spotlights on what doesn't work.
Absolutely.
In all of us.
And for
all
some
of us.
Yeah, but it's the thing is it's the knowing that, there's an old picture, or when your hand is in a fist, you're holding on tight or in battle or whatever, you can't put anything else in that hand. And when you open that hand,
sometimes the fist is appropriate because that's the clenching and the unclenching. Because what it is we're always in a wavelength. We're always in over and under and over and under. And what I see is really interesting. I'm seeing this in myself and my husband, actually, is that there's some big issues coming up between us now. And inevitably, if one of us is holding an over-powerful position or an over-aggressive position, the other one is holding an under-powerful, under-aggressive. And it's just a dance that we do.
Right.
And I'm seeing, I have these really strong ideas about, okay, we're not having that behavior of yours now. But in my semi-wisdom here, I have to look at it and go, okay, so if he's holding that position of over, then somewhere I'm holding under, and so I'm creating a different kind of balance here. And so if I keep putting my attention on him and say, you can't do that, you shouldn't do that, nothing will get solved. I can't force him to move off because I'm holding the other part of the balance.
Oh, okay. So that's a very good example. Okay, because that can be that can be in a relationship, that can be with your employer, but it can also be on a world. If the United States and Syria, or
Absolutely.
whatever.
Absolutely.
So what's the answer? I don't know.
The
answer is the right.
Is for me is to look at my behavior and calmly say, as long as you're doing that, I'm just not going there. So an example of that would be he would have this behavior that I don't like, and actually it's absolutely wrong, I have to tell you.
Of course.
I would rage at it and make it wrong and yell at him to change and rah, rah, rah. But the truth is that if I hold myself steady and just say no, very quickly things go back into balance in a certain way, and things that need to be healed might take time to heal because, some of these issues that he and I have taken opposite sides on have come through the generations of our families,
Right.
And they're not maybe going to heal overnight, but what I'm noticing is I have a calmness in myself, and he has a calmness in himself, and we're actually being quite affectionate while we're just not going to that one place. Because we both have a sense that it's not actually just about that. It's about something else that we're not looking at. And so, we're having this willingness, supported by divinity, I feel, to just stop and look around and kind of, really what I'm feeling my husband doing for me right now is affirming his true love for me, even though he's still doing things that I'm not happy with. And it's not even he's doing. Neither of us are doing in that area because we have this kind of moratorium on it. We're just not going there.
I like that. I like that.
Exploring something very different. Whereas before we'd be at war about it.
Right.
Now we're both sitting back and looking at it. And I mean, what I'm seeing in other areas, like the American government, in a way, they've taken a moratorium on this issue by shutting everything down.
Right. They just don't want to deal with it.
Well, there's nothing sometimes that can be dealt with. Sometimes you need to sit and look at something and see what falls apart and what grows. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because really, when it comes right down to it, when we get into wrangling and thinking of fix-its and, you're wrong, no, you're wrong, what we get into, it's not helpful.
Right.
It's not, we're turning our back, we're ignoring what's really going on, which, it's a growing up. It's a growing up, and people have to take different sides of it to shine the light on all the different possibilities.
But there has been a fairly common thread here of people understanding that in order for the new to come in, a lot of our systems that we have created in all over the globe, governments, banking systems, our food industry, all of these things that have been created with a somewhat negative, fear-based creation when they were created in that energy, that they're all going to crumble because they don't work, they're not sustainable anymore, they're not even good for us. We're so it seems to me,
I think the truth of it is they crumble, something else very quickly grows in their place, because if you look at nature, you can have a big fire and everything can be wiped out, but within a month, the green is back.
Right, and what occurred to me when you were talking about the government being shut down like that, and we're seeing that in Canada too with our political system. How many times has the Prime Minister, prorogued the government? Well, that's never happened before, not to this degree. So it's like there's something happening that is, and again, it's not about judgment here. I'm just noticing a pattern. It's like
the government went on strike.
Well, it's like the system doesn't work the way it is. We don't know what to do about it, so let's just stop doing it. And then when what comes back, maybe we'll come back entirely different and something that is sustainable.
That's right. So what people are saying is we've gone as far as we can possibly go with this combative, oppositional behavior in government. It just there has to be a place where that ends, because that's not our true nature. We're not truly dual. We're just pretending to be. We're just practicing it. We're trying it out. But at the very basis of who we really are, we're one, and that's where we're coming to understand. I mean, even quantum physics is showing us that everything relates to everything else, and that scientists are starting to talk about, a place outside of what we can see with our senses, where everything is a oneness, where there's something bigger going on, and it's like, oh, okay, so that, and of course from that place of bigger and outside, and we're getting so much benevolence and so much powerful energy pouring through us, and plus, we've been here in other lifetimes. We've lived on planet Earth at times when it was an absolute golden age of abundance and love and curiosity and people, in a totally different way than we can even imagine from where we are now. But we were there. Most of us were there. There are some new souls who weren't. But even so, those new souls were, consciousness too that has a part in the wholeness of it. So we can return to this state of balance much faster than we went out of balance, because we had never been solely cut off from divinity before. It was a very new experience, and we had to go slow and figure it out and deal with the fear and the lack.
Wow.
And now we're back, and it's pouring in. And you know how it is when you get a new computer. You just transfer your old files on, and man, you're going. There's downtime. Now there's a downtime as they reprogram everything.
Right.
And, yeah.
But if we
and
can,
that's kind of what to go back to the planets. That's exactly what they're showing us. There's a downtime here. There's a downtime when Uranus and Neptune are holding kind of opposite stances. Neptune is in Pisces, where it's at home, and Uranus is in Aries, which is a squared planet to Pisces. So you have very opposite energies. The quiet, inner Neptunian, Piscean energy of, everything of hidden and deep, dark spaces, And then we have this Aries, the boy, the child, racing out into the sunshine, and Uranus, that electrical energy of curiosity and excitement, that, thunder and lightning and waking everybody up. The opposites are here. And then we have Chiron, and I want to talk about Chiron because it's in Pisces too, which is sweet. So Chiron represents the wounded healer. Chiron, the wounded healer, represents that part of us that goes, comes into this life and is wounded in a certain way. We heal it because, divinity heals us. We get gifts and we have experiences that inevitably heal, just like the body heals in some way always. And from that, we get a strength. We have a teaching and a purpose in life from what we've learned through being wounded and healing the wound. Our focus, our attention has been placed on some aspect of life that has given us this incredible knowledge of the process of going through not enough or too much of something to balance.
Right.
And we take that and we share it with the world. So with Chiron retrograde, everybody's looking at their roles. Everybody in this planet has been brainwashed to think that they're here to fill a role that's already been invented. A doctor, a lawyer, an Indian chief. Right. You are expected to fill a role, following rules, and that is no longer what we're doing. That is not what the young people want here, and that is not what's going to happen on the planet anymore. We're moving into a time where each unique being will start to discover what their sacred gifts are and what they want to do, and they're going to follow that through long lifetime of exploration in their own unique way.
Wow. That
and the magic of it is that all the pieces of the puzzle will be there because that's the yin and the yang of it.
Well, this to me, it just feels like I really feel that pause, and I really feel at the same time a certain level of joy in that what's possible. I'm kind of curious, like I don't know, but I'm curious.
Yes.
And
the
I think
curiosity is definitely there.
Yeah, and it feels too like we're really being, held in this new place of being able to almost like look behind and look forward at the same time. Whereas before, or at least for me, that's how it is. It feels like I'm able to actually see not just my life, but life on this planet and, what else is possible,
Exactly. And there's the Aries energy with the Aquarian curiosity. And Aries is the child, coming into this new evolution with, oh, look at that. Oh, I'm feeling this. Oh, this is amazing. And Aquarius with this huge, big kind of searchlight, 50 years in the future, always, from any given point. And just not putting up with anything that's not intensely true. It doesn't mean if it's right or wrong. It's not about that. It's what is true here. That's what Uranus and Aquarius have for us. And then there's Chiron retrograde, this little tiny out there asteroid that has a huge influence on us because it's the new energy of this time where we are, all of us, being motivated to move into what's our dharma, what's the service we've come here to create. And so there's a lot of healing happening to wounds that we received in the old world through our families and through culture, through catastrophe, through whatever we chose to experience, whatever that was. And there's a huge a healing energy. It's as if a huge bomb has been rubbed on all of us to take us from where we were into where we could be. People are going to start being open to their potential very soon. That place where, when they talk about women marrying men based on their potential, you should never do that. Well, we do have potential, and this is the time now when all of us can start to access and move into it. And again, it's going to be very, very quick. But of course, there's a time of excitement coming to us where we start looking at very closely at what's been created in the past, and there's going to be lots of, and ooh, that's terrible. But then there's going to be a quick turnaround and people looking from the past at what didn't work and what did work, and then turning into the future and deciding, well, what do we want to keep here, and how are we going to set up the principles and the rules and the institutions that are going to honor our free will and honor our curiosity and honor our differences.
And we can expect
going to be a growing energy. Yeah.
Well, we can expect, and that's why really love to have these conversations. But we can expect more truth to come out, and I think it would be great if we could adopt an attitude of, as actually Rose talked about this morning about neutrality. Like it has to come out. So let's try not to be so angry when we finally see the truth about certain things or situations, or in our own lives. in our own lives. See the truth about.
There's going to be so much truth coming out that the neutrality is going to happen because people are going to be overwhelmed by the truth that's going to just start pouring out, like the shock, the dismay, we can stand around and point fingers at it, but there's only so much that we can actually wrap our heads around that just has been bad. But at living disconnected from divinity.
Well, this is what I'm saying. Rather than going into a lot of judgment, a lot of, you mean that happened? Oh, somebody should be, strung up for that, or somebody should be punished. Right. Or there's got to be. If we could, look at the big picture. Okay, this whole planetary experience for many, many lifetimes has been shrouded in secrecy, and because for one thing, a lot of us accepted. I mean, it was how we we came into the world, and that's what we were told. There were secrets everywhere, family secrets, secrets in society, secrets in our schools and our churches and our systems. And there was a kind of a common, as you said earlier in the show, a theme that we didn't want to know. We said, we'll go to elections, we'll elect somebody, and we'll let them take care of stuff. We don't want to know how it's done. Or, go to the bank, put your money in. We don't want to know how banking actually works. So and
it's too much.
Exactly. Not everybody
can. Too much responsibility, too little empowerment because of the energy imbalance on the planet.
Right,
we
and that's
didn't have it within our power systems to do anything without that proper balance of energy.
Right. So when I look at this is for me. I'm not saying everybody has to be this way, but for me, as the truth comes out, because years ago I used to seek the truth for different reasons. I wanted a better world, but I was very involved in politics, and so my search for truth was to expose lies. And there was the energy at that time was very much about, revealing this person's doing this and it's bad, and this person, and now I find I'm so much calmer about it. It's like, you know what, I know everybody's been doing stuff that hasn't been very nice, and we, did it out of survival, and that's what we were trained to do, and I don't think that we're going to create a better world, an exquisite world, like I keep saying, by trying to find and make people into villains and victims and staying in that junk. Because that's what created what we have now, and we want something different. So I'm just really hoping that as the truth comes out, not that people, can say, oh, well, I guess, we're not supposed to say anything about that because we got to be neutral. I'm not saying that, but just a calmness. Okay, yeah, we knew stuff was going on and we didn't know the details, and be horrified if you want for a while, but let's not stay there. That's what I'm hoping for,
Well, I
Debbie.
think what's going to happen is there's going to be an accountability because there is consequences, and for those beings who need to be held accountable, they need to be held accountable because that's their spiritual growth. That's their part of the... But, an accountability that isn't about more violence, perhaps. I don't know what the answer is. I certainly don't have it. And I think that's part of it, too, is where we stop in that sense that, oh, I know, let's just do it this way. And just like we have this pause that you mentioned, it's like, well, I guess I don't know what to do here. Because when we create that pause of, I don't really know, that's when the wisdom, there's room, there's a crack and an opening for the wisdom, the truth of divinity to pour into us, and all of a sudden we will know.
Yeah, that's where surrender.
We will know what is ours to do. We'll know, yes, because I don't know, you're right, that's what it is. I don't know is a form of surrender of goals, a surrender of imagining that we do know what to do.
Well, it's
I don't know.
I think I don't know is an awesome question because or declaration, because we haven't been here before, not in this way. That's what's different. We've been on the planet before, but we haven't been in this before, and we are knowing. 50 years ago, we didn't have the same kind of choices. We didn't have the same kind of consciousness on the planet. Yeah. Things are different, and I think it's great if we can acknowledge, all right, you know what, we're in a different world. We want a different future for our children. Awesome. It's going to be different. And
this is the truth of the feminine. This is what the feminine brings in that's different. What it brings in is the truth that there is a wisdom that does know. And while we down here in the depths of the ocean don't have access to that as much, there is a process, there is a oneness, it's that eternal stream that Linda Nardelli was talking about in the show that the three of us did together. She talks about how the wisdom that Masc and Dia brings to us that's appropriate for the moment, it's not just created in that moment, it's always been there.
Right.
The truths of the world are eternal, and they are principles, so they are stretchable for every situation. They cover everything. And one of those big truths is love. You know, we're beings of love. So, and we're safe. We're in the hands of benevolence all the time. So the pause doesn't mean that we're giving up our jobs, or we're giving up our responsibilities. What we're doing is waiting for the truth to come through, for what we need to know to jump over the next hurdle. What we didn't know in the last moment in this physical linear existence will come through exactly when we need it. And all the tools and the materials and the help that we need to do what needs to be done will come through too. And when we pause and look around for it, listening, like Rachel says, listening to the silence between the bird calls.
Rachel Kyler.
Yes, and I had another friend who said, you know, the space between the words, that's as palpable and as important as the words, as the bird call itself, is the space between, because that's where divinity resides, and it comes through, and it covers, it gives us the perfect response. And each one of us in each of our own unique ways is inspired in the moment to be and do exactly what will be our part to create these puzzles, the answers to the puzzles.
Right.
And that's the other part about how we're growing and expanding, is that we're moving from individual, what's called in some ways the lone wolf individuality, where each one of us is as separated and is defined in uniqueness and aloneness as possible. We're now coming back through this resurgence of feminine energy to where we each are going to start working in community in a way that's never been known on this planet, where each one of us, from a mature 20-year-old or 25-year-old maturity of understanding what's happened, and where everything is brought together into a weaving of experience, we're going to stand and move into a place where, as individuals, we will move into our part of the whole. It hasn't really been possible here before.
Right. So it's not about giving up individual. It's about taking what you are uniquely individual and bringing it into the whole, which is different.
Right.
It is totally
Billions
different.
of years ago, one cell came into existence. And then there was all kinds of one-celled beings. But in order to have the complexity and sophistication of being a human being, those cells had to get together and cooperate and create something bigger, with billions of cells creating a single human. And now that single human becomes the one cell working together. This is a very Eastern philosophy where, you talk about, and it's also chaos theory, where everything falls apart and then is reorganized at a higher level of sophistication and complexity.
And there's science to back that up too, because Dr. Bruce Lipton talks about that all the time.
Absolutely.
And I love that. I just so love going into the deep with you, Debbie. It is, we just never know where we're going to go, and tonight was just delicious all the way.
Well, it was pretty piecemeal and partial, but it seemed to be a thread was coming through.
Well,
I want to different things talked about, and then things were kind of brought back to the beginning, as Spirit does bring us.
Well, I think that this show is fairly long now, and I want to let people know we are going to continue the conversation because it never ends, and my curiosity never ends, and Debbie's insatiable appetite to discuss with me never ends. It never seems to anyway, and her ability to tap into this higher wisdom is just always there. So, you know,
that's the circles within circles, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
We just keep going around in circles.
But it's fun because it really, to me, these are the kinds of conversations that just are not that common today, and it for me anyway, it really takes it to another level to expand and be able to look at things differently. Sorry about that. I do have a train going through town, so you can hear it a little bit. That happens in my neighborhood, and I love the train. It's always going somewhere or coming from somewhere, and I always think that's fun. But so I want to thank you, Debbi, for joining me tonight. Is there anything else you wanted to share before we conclude?
Well, just one small thing, that Mercury's going retrograde October 21st. So like you said before we got on the air, we're in the shadow of it, and we can recognize that things are not going to work out the way we think. Communication and transportation and technology tends to break down, and any faults and flaws, and there are many we notice in our world today, in all those levels of things, things are going to be not working, and it's a perfect time for us to practice going within and creating that meditative space where we can get the downloads and the connection from divinity and know what is ours to do and how to hold the place for a higher consciousness to transcend the past, because once we transcend what's gone before, we don't ever look back. Something new is created, and that's what we're on the threshold.
So this starts with the shadow? It starts with the shadow before you
And it ends with the shadow, too.
Oh.
Going and coming, there's a shadow of that. Yeah, basically we're in Mercury retrograde October 21st to November 11th. A good whole month there.
Wow.
And with a little bit of shadow on both sides. And I have a feeling that since it's in Scorpio, Mercury's retrograde in Scorpio, we're into something very intense. Are we surprised? I doubt it.
Yeah. Well, and then ending on November 11th, which is Remembrance Day in Canada, which is always a very, you know,
right.
we remember war and the sacrifices made. So it seems to me that is remembering our past again.
And in the past, we valued peace, and that's always the secret. Where is our peace?
Mm-hmm.
If we take that responsibility and that lantern of peace in whatever way we can, and give ourselves time to go through the emotions without using them outwardly and hurting other people, and without keep compressing them inwardly and hurting ourselves, but just let them be emotions, energy in motion, and move through us, and be just aware of what we feel and what we're afraid of and what we long for, we'll be so well supported by divinity in all that we do, in our own unique, different worlds where we are our own creators.
Wow, that's fantastic. I love it. Thank you so much, Debbi.
My pleasure. Thank you, Catherine. It's been a slice.
Slice of deep and delicious, that is for sure. Oh, that's perfect. I want to thank you for listening as well, and for joining us to go deep, because it's not for everyone, that's for sure, but you know what, this was fun. This is going to end our show for tonight, and like I said, deep and delicious, go deep or go home, and that's more of a fun title than anything else, because, you know, I don't want any of you to go home unless you've gone deep with us. Oh, my gosh. For information on all my shows, the replays, future guests, please go to letsgetrealchatwithcatherine.com. Check out the daily inspiration from Catherine's Kaleidoscope. There's a link right on the show page. Feel free to explore, share. I just love it when people share, and I love the comments. And you can look for me on Facebook as well, where we have more discussions. It's going to be a lot of fun. So there you go. Until next time, I absolutely wish you all the very best, and take care.
Wasn't that amazing? Thank you to my guests for sharing with us today. Thank you for watching. Feel free to share the link. You can join us for live shows by going to letsgetrealchattingwithkatherine.com and listen to the replays from the show page, preview guests, and explore links to our Facebook fan page, WordPress blog, and more. We are creating an exquisite world. Until next time, take care.